Hello, this is Paul Johnson with The Optimistic American. Today, Dr. Bash and I host Rabbi Allouche. Rabbi Allouche is an intellectual. He is a rabbi who's very, very inspirational. And more importantly, he's a scholar. He is able to give us a lot of information from a theological standpoint. He's also spent quite a bit of time on the front inside of Israel. He has a son that is fighting in the IDF. I think you're going to find him very interesting to listen to today. Now, if you like what it is that we're doing, push that subscribe button. Take part in the program. Become part of our community. But either way, here we go with Rabbi Allouche and Dr. Basha. Rabbi Allouche and Dr. Basha, thank you both for being on the show today. Emily, we appreciate you being here. Today we're going to focus on anti-Semitism. We're very proud to have Rabbi Allouche. Now, I will tell you, I've been in a lot of mosques, synagogues, as well as churches as mayor. I've never heard anybody who is as charismatic at speaking as Rabbi Allouche. It's been a real honor of mine to be able to be in his services. So we're honored to have you here with us today.
Thank you, Paul. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for your kind words. I'm going to make sure that my mother hears what you just said.
She should be very proud. Rabbi Paul and I, we speak in private about you were just such a commendable leader, and not everybody there's a charisma, of course, in being a leader, but as a spiritual leader for us in our synagogue and community, and you are a model to us in terms of how do we respond when such massacres and catastrophes are occurring to our people and in our homeland. And so many of us, me included, look to you for guidance. How do we make sense of what is happening in the world and these massacres and atrocities and massacres of innocent civilians and children and women in Israel when Hamas came and attacked people in their homes, and it's savage. And I think we look to leaders for answers to show us how do we respond when we're feeling terrified, terrorized, and angry. And I just want to commend you and thank you for all of us for bringing our community even stronger together, being a model for us and helping us feel engaged. One of your main messages was, don't be passive in this, lean in, engage, speak up. If you hear anti-Semitism, speak up against it. It's important that our voices are louder as a community and come together in solidarity. Don't grieve alone, grieve together, and we will be stronger together. And I just want to thank you for also giving us the hope and the optimism and the reason to persevere. That is so hard to do at a time when people are grieving and terrorized and terrified. And so thank you for all of that. And our prayers go to you and your family, and thanking you and Esther, and also your son who is fighting in the front lines in Gaza. I also know that you just returned from Gaza yourself. So I would love to ask you whatever you're comfortable sharing about your insights from your trip and meeting with survivors.
Yes, look, first of all, thank you for your kind words also, Emily. And I will say that, as a leader of the community, I try to rely on the sources of Judaism and of wisdom altogether to empower the community. So really, we should be thanking those that came in front before us, because I'm but a channel to those voices and to those messages. And I hope that indeed it gives us, all of us, the strength that we need during these times and the resilience that we ought to have to persevere and to eventually ensure that goodness prevails. Regarding my recent trip to Israel, so ever since this war broke out, I've had the privilege of being in Israel twice. In my most recent trip, I visited the Gaza border where I went to some of those villages that experienced the greatest blows of this horrific massacre. They included the village or the kibbutz of Be'eri and the city of Sderot. And what I saw was really nothing compared to what my son and so many other soldiers saw when they were called on that dreadful day of October 7th to go and evacuate all of these innocent civilians that were being attacked, and at the same time to try and eliminate the threats. But I still saw the remnants of what they saw, and you could still see blood on the floors of homes. You could see the horrible contrast between that blood on the floor and the half full bottle of beer that those Hamas terrorists took from the fridges of the homes that they went to go and have a sip and act as if everything was normal. They left those bottles of beer on the table and at the same time massacred those young children. And you see this contrast and you say to yourself, wow, if there's a face to evil, then this is it. And then I also met with some of the kibbutznikim of the villages that were coming back slowly but surely to rebuild their rain-sacked homes and to rebuild their rain-sacked kibbutz. And what was deeply inspiring to me was that those villages, although they had faced the worst of the worst, the lowest of the lows, they were coming back with renewed vigor to build and build and build on, to ensure that evil does not have the last say. And in them, I really saw, if I may add, the Jewish spirit that's been carrying Jews for now 4,000 years, because we have been one of the most persecuted nations. Yet it is fascinating to me that with every destruction that we faced, we responded with construction and a spur of growth like we've never seen before. Think about it. In Jewish history, if you look at the destruction of the Second Temple in the year 70 CE, what the Romans did to the Jews, what the Hamas terrorists now did to the Jews, and so many others did to the Jews. And yet we went and moved to Babylon, and we authored the Babylonian Talmud, which stands at the very backbone of the Jewish library. After the Spanish Inquisition, we moved to Israel, and we founded the school of Kabbalah that has become now so dominant. After the Holocaust, the state of Israel was established. So it's quite fascinating to see that the same spirit of answering darkness with light and despair with hope was embodied by these simple villagers who were coming back to rebuild their kibbutzim. And to me, that really is the sign, more than anything, that as we say, Yisrael Chai, the nation of Israel is well and alive and is here to stay, and to ensure that goodness and truth prevail.
Rabbi Allouche, before we go into the anti-Semitism, just because what you just said is so powerful, and there are real people who are being affected by this, certainly your son, the members of the IDF, Israel, the kibbutz, and for that matter, innocent people who've been abused by Hamas on the other side. Could we maybe start with a prayer? I would just appreciate having a prayer for Israel and for the soldiers, your son, and other innocent people who are engaged here.
Absolutely. And starting with a prayer also invites God to our conversations. I don't think there's a better way to begin this. Thank you for offering this. And yes, with your permission, let me use a prayer from the traditional texts of Judaism. It's in fact a prayer that we recite here at our synagogue every Saturday. And it's a prayer for the IDF soldiers, all those standing on the side of goodness. And at the same time, it's a prayer for peace in the world and for our ultimate redemption. So we'll begin. May He bless our forefathers and our mothers, bless the members of the Israeli Defense Forces and the security services, and all who stand for good in this world. May He guard them and protect them wherever they may be. May the Lord make the enemies who rise against them and against all that is good be struck down before them. May the Holy One, blessed be, protect and deliver them and all of the innocent people in the world altogether from all trouble and distress, affliction and illness, and send blessing and success to all of the work of their hands. May he subdue the evil in this world and crown all that is good with deliverance and victory. And may there be fulfilled the verse, it is the Lord your God who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies and to eventually deliver you. May it happen speedily, and let us say, Amen.
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 Thank you, Rabbi. That was beautiful. And I love that you spoke about the Yisrael Chai. I know one of the things that really gave me hope and inspiration during my darker times, and as I was learning, as these atrocities were unfolding and we were witnessing this all before us and hearing the stories in the synagogue of the survivors, is this notion of us coming together as a community. And there was a story of the grandfather who went to go and save his son and grandchildren, and he had found survivors who were coming back, and he was transporting them away from his family who were in the fight and being held in the underground bomb shelters, and drove away from his family not once but twice. And the question when they asked him, like, how is it that you're even possible to save people and drive them away from your family twice, he said, if not me, then who? And I just think that that belief is so profoundly Jewish. It is ingrained in my psyche, and it is so true. If not me, then who? If I'm not there to save my family or save my people or save the other Jewish people, no one else is going to be there to save us. And I think that the community who believes that so strongly and participates and leans in to those difficulties and that task and sees the Jewish people as part of this tribe, that we're all extended and connected, that there is this greater sense of strength as a people that comes from that. And there's a beautiful song, Hine matuvu manaim, shevet achim gam yachad. We stand before God as a community, and we're all connected, even with our ancestors, and we stand on their shoulders. And it is so profoundly Jewish. There's really no other way to explain it.
Yeah. And I think you touch upon maybe the two most important ingredients to humanity, dare I say, altogether. And that's the ingredient of the sense of belonging that we must foster, and at the same time, the sense of responsibility that we must cultivate, because we saw those two elements in full display during those horrific evil attacks of October 7th. There was, on the one hand, this deep sense of belonging, that we belong to a family, like you put it so beautifully, and that we're in this together. And if not us, then who? And that we have, at the same time, this deep sense of responsibility, therefore, for one another. They say that the word responsibility is actually a combination of two English words, right? Responsibility, the ability to respond. And the ability of those heroes to respond to these terrible attacks was just inspiring, because no one, I don't know of one story of whether it was a soldier or a civilian saying, no, I'm going to pass the buck on to someone else. Everyone truly owned that responsibility, and went and did everything in their power to save those in harm's way. But they did that again out of this deep sense that we're all one big family, and we all must take care of one another. And I think that really, if there is a blessing in disguise, or at least a silver lining, as they say, during this terrible or trying times, it's exactly that our family has come out as strong as ever, and our sense of responsibility has been demonstrated like never before.
All right. So here's my question. I remember about 5 years ago at Charlottesville, there were these videos of 1,000 young men carrying torches saying, Jews will not replace us. And it was, to me, it was horrific to watch. It was something that I thought really only existed on the, and I'm going to call them the radical right, because I don't think this is the right. I think it's the radical right. And at the same time, I was astonished when on October the 7th, literally immediately, there were members of the, let's call them the radical left, saying, a professor saying that he was exhilarated by what it was that had happened. And members of Congress, not all of them, a very few of them, saying, from the river to the sea, meaning we're going to march them out. I was stunned to see that anti-Semitism exists on the far right and the far left. But of course, in history, that's not unusual. The Jewish population finds themselves constantly in this position on one side of people who are saying, the Jews will not replace us, but on the other side, they just include them as part of the white patriarchy and a power structure that they think is negative or evil. In history in Europe, we've seen the Jews were being persecuted and discriminated against long before Germany. I can recall going to cemeteries in Poland. I can recall seeing clocks that treated Jewish people as being evil people in the process. Here's my question. Why is it that anti-Semitism throughout history has been so strong? Why is it that it keeps happening? Any thoughts on that?
Look, that's a great question. I think it's the $1 million question. First, let me say that, just like love, complete love, and that ultimate level of love has no reason. It is beyond reason. If I love because of a reason, if my love is therefore conditional, then my love is not true love. Because if the reason goes away, then the love will go away. True love is beyond reason. And I would say it's the same with hatred. True hatred, too, is beyond reason. But you are right that there are things that may trigger this hatred. And if I have to go to the Jewish sources, I will go to the source in the Talmud, in a tractate called Rosh Hashanah, that says that Jewish hatred began to sprout in the world when we received the Torah, 5 books of Moses, on Mount Sinai. And in fact, the Talmud has an interesting play on the word Sinai, because in Hebrew, the word Sinai also sounds like another Hebrew word, the word sin'ah, which means hatred. And what the Talmud says is that the world saw the Jews receive this Torah, which is a book of morals and a blueprint for life and a type of GPS that has all sorts of rules. And because of that, many started to hate the Jews, saying, hey, you're not going to tell us how to live life. You're not going to tell us what's moral and what's ethical. And that may have triggered that hatred. To put it in a simplistic way, there are many students in every classroom that maybe despise the best student in the class because it reminds them of their own flaws. Oh, he has an A+. I'm just a B student. So maybe I should find something negative to say about the A+ student so that he's in a way excommunicated, and then I can just be me, be that B. So that's really what the Talmud is sharing. So could very well be that because of our book of morals, of ethics, because of the Torah, the people that are specifically unethical and immoral hate us the most.
Let me run something by you. I know you're a scholar, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because this is my view from watching this around the world. There is an envy. There's an envy that happens in the Jewish community because they were dispersed throughout the entire world. All had communities that existed in Europe, that existed throughout the Arabic countries, in communist countries. It was spread everywhere. And it seems like everywhere they went, they were prosperous. Now, you talk about the book, the Torah. I look at stories like the story of Jacob and Esau. And Jacob is this guy who really is doing kind of some bad things in the beginning with his father and with his brother. He if you were going to try to create a superhero, you wouldn't have put him in the book in the beginning. You would have picked someone else. But yet he goes out, he ends up having to leave his home. He falls in love with a woman, and he decides to work for her, for his uncle, to try to get this woman as his wife. He works 7 years. His uncle tricks him and marries him to the older daughter, which had other issues that he didn't want, but he then works another 7 years. And when he gets done, he then says, okay, well, I'm going to leave. And he gets this second wife, and they go to split up the sheep. Well, during that 14 years, he became a very good shepherd. He was a hard worker. He built up wealth. And what ended up happening is he knew that he needed to leave. But this is a story that we're telling, or that you're telling, and the Jewish community is telling over and over again, meaning you're not downgrading wealth. You're not downgrading someone working hard and making money. In fact, you're talking about issues of literacy and issues of education and issues of sacrifice and sacrificing for the future, and that it's multi-generational, not just for me, but it's for the people that come behind me. And of course, Jacob ends up fathering the 12 tribes of Israel. To me, that book that you're talking about has these stories that actually helps promote people in life success. It also has stories of envy with Cain and Abel, and how if you brood over those differences and how someone else does better than you, that it can completely destroy your life. Now, one way to look at that is to be envious of the Jewish community. Another one might be to say, hey, let me look at that book you're reading. I want to understand what it is that it's saying. I don't know if that's off to you, but to me, that envy does connect to that book, because that book has very, very good moral lessons on how to live life better.
Right. Very well said, Paul. Really, you're right. I mean, that book, the Torah that we're referring to, is a book of eternal truth. It is true today as it was true 1,000 years ago. And the fact that the proof is that our forefathers used this book as their GPS, as we were saying, just as we are using it. And the results are the same. The results of clarity, of direction, of meaning, of purpose are the same. So it is indeed a book that I would encourage everyone to open up and read. I know that in some of the hotel chains, you can find it even in your drawer right next to your bed. So open it up and read it, because it has so much wisdom that is eternal, and so much guidance that can serve us even today in the 21st century. I will add that maybe just to draw 2 lessons from this book. One lesson, and 2 lessons that may very well be the secret behind our survival. One lesson is that there is a word that does not exist in that book, a word, in fact, that doesn't even exist in the Hebrew language. And that word is the word victimhood. And that is because we've really never seen ourselves as victims, regardless of the suffering and the challenges that we may have faced. We've always seen ourselves, as everyone should see themselves, as eternal souls. In every one of us, there's a soul that has infinite potential, that regardless of the hardships of life, it can still outshine them and fulfill its God-given purpose. And therefore, the word victimhood has been as strange to us as it gets, because victims mean, what does it mean to be a victim? It means to almost surrender to the challenges of life and to say to yourself, well, I'm less than what I thought I was. And that is certainly not the Torah perspective. That's number one. And number two, we see that in another biblical story of the destruction of Sodom, that evil city that God had decided to destroy. And after the supplication of Abraham, he also agreed to save Lot, Abraham's nephew, from the city, and his wife. Lot and his wife were told to escape the city so that they could be saved, but they were also told not to look back. And as everyone who reads the Bible knows, they, just before the destruction of Sodom, they escaped the city. Lot heard God's message and he did not look back, yet his wife did. And she instantaneously turned into a pillar of salt. But the message of this idea I think is very powerful, and we've seen that in Jewish history from the beginning of times. And that is that destruction might happen in life. And yes, as they say, spaghetti hits the fan, but we can never look back. We must be able to look forward in order to rebuild a future that will erase the hard memories of the past. And I've seen that time and time again, but mainly in our generation by Holocaust survivors. Holocaust survivors who may have experienced the worst of humanity. And many of them were in camps facing death every day. But when they came out miraculously, they never looked back. Instead, they were dedicated completely to building for themselves and for their children to come a future that will be able to carry them and lift them up from those harsh times that they faced. That, in my eyes, is a very Jewish spirit or Jewish perspective that, again, we glean from the Torah and from the stories like Lot and his wife. And that is yet a second element also that teaches us on how to deal with difficulties in life altogether and how to ensure that we never become victims.
Viktor Frankl wrote The Meaning of Life, the book, The Meaning of Life. And Emily and I... Emily, go ahead.
Sorry, I just corrected you on the title, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, the meaning part.
Yeah. But in the book, when you watch him, that what you're saying is exactly what he did. He's in Auschwitz. He said that that as he was walking through the line, they would take 9 or 10 people to the left and 1 person to the right, and he thought for certain he was the one they were going to kill. He had no idea that when he took his entire family to the left, that they would be dead within days, and he was going to a work camp. In fact, he didn't know for a long period of time what happened to them. But one of the stories that he tells in there that I thought was so amazing is he had, of course, spent a lot of time on the whole idea of logotherapy and trying to help people find meaning. But he focused the prisoners on watching the sunset. And then when they would come back in, they would talk about how beautiful it was and the colors that were there. And were there other people around the world watching the same thing? And maybe was it their families or people that they cared about? And it became so important to people that they literally wanted to be there at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock whenever the sun would go down so they could see it. It gave them a sense of meaning, a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging. And he made the comment that we have free will. We can choose to be a victim if that's what we want to be, but we can also choose something more enlightened.
Right, but very well said. He's the one also, I don't know if I'm quoting verbatim, but he's the one who said that from his experience at Auschwitz, that you can take everything from a person except for one's attitude to life. And that is deeply embedded in the Torah, as we were speaking about. The attitude that we have is entirely under our control, regardless of the circumstances we're in. And he personified that so shiningly, Viktor Frankl.
I think that one of the things that we miss too is sometimes this happens intentionally, meaning I think anti-Semitism oftentimes is a political means. It's a means to a political end. So, the Holocaust deniers, right after the war, Holocaust denial began to take place. Well, why was that? Well, there actually were movements in the United States before World War II that were very anti-Semitic, that liked National Socialism, that believed that we should become a fascist state. And of course, the war kind of snuffed that out. Well, if that's what you're trying to push for after the war, you have to deny that the Holocaust took place. It was a means of politics. The Ba'ath Party oftentimes does the same thing. The Holocaust didn't end in 1945 when Germany finally capitulated. It then began to take other forms throughout the world. The Ba'ath Party promoted anti-Semitism in harsh ways all around the Arabic world, as of course Emily's family knows very well. But again, it was a political means. I look at what's happening in Gaza. I went to Gaza and inside Gaza back in 1990s, and it was clear then that people were that there was a myth that was being perpetuated amongst them, that it was the Jews that were at fault of what was going on with them. It's not lost on me. There are 3 billionaires, literally worth $11 billion, sitting in Qatar that are the leaders of Hamas, who end up scraping off tons of money because Hamas has received hundreds of billions of dollars. And that's not an exaggeration, hundreds of billions. But the leaders steal from them, rip them off, enslave them, put them into positions where they're then indoctrinated into this hatred of Israel. And why? Well, if you're trying to keep their eyes off of you for the money that you're making, if you're trying to move a political agenda, you want to turn your people into victims. You want to turn them into a position where they feel like they have no other agency while they're there other than to oppose this mythical group. So my point, I guess, is there's always a political reason for anti-Semitism. It stems back to people who want to promote it because it advances them.
Very well said. I would agree with that too. I think that it's almost like we see that, and I'm sure in the world of psychology, Emily, you see that quite often, but it's the codependency that is created by abusers in marriages, for example, so that they can continue to abuse while at the same time have their spouse cling to them. And that is what is happening. That power that corrupts those Hamas leaders is also developing this codependency of the Palestinian people, who I would say, and I've met many of them, are truly good people. And they have, in a way, by creating this type of system, have also created a nation that is now indoctrinated, and a nation that unfortunately is being so abused.
Dr. Basha?
I think the part that really concerns me in the growing rise of anti-Semitism is that people who are not really educated on the history of Israel, they don't necessarily have to be, but as soon as they got some information or saw some horrific content, felt the need to pick a side. And this is where I was really getting quite frustrated, honestly, in that people were seeing, innocence of children, whether it was Palestinian children or Jewish children, Israeli children, who were being harmed, and feeling the need to pick a side. There is already a narrative of Jews being colonizers. And so when people see, oh, okay, innocence is being hurt, let me now not feel any compassion for Jewish children who were being slaughtered and killed in front of their parents, and beheaded. Let me just pick a side for the side I'm going to sympathize, and create some kind of cognitive dissonance to not feel anything for this other side. The concern is this is probably a large part of our population that we're seeing in the middle that really has no buy-in. There's no reason why they should feel that they have a need to pick a side, and yet they are. And that's the group that really concerns me. They're getting their information from TikTok or social media or X, formerly known as Twitter, and they're being indoctrinated and radicalized themselves because they're really just getting spoon-fed what other powers are wanting to inform them on. And of course, those views are going to be slanted. We know that China is going to control and censor whatever is on TikTok. And if you're getting majority of your news on TikTok, of course, it's going to be anti-Semitic. It's going to be against Israel. And so what do we say and do to that population? Because so many of them are youth. So many of them are young, and they're impressionable. And now they're given this narrative for them to just go on and repeat, but really not appreciating or fully understanding the complexity. And they don't necessarily have to understand the complexity, but just the fact that they're choosing to take a side against Israel is really concerning to me. And they see Hamas as representative of Palestinians, and they can't separate it out in their mind to see the political underpinnings of how Hamas is using Palestinians for their own political propaganda. And so all of that is concerning. I guess the question is, what do we do to combat anti-Semitism for this group?
That's a great question. And I don't know if I have the magical answer, but like you pointed out, I think it has a lot to do with education and education and education. People, like you said, are relying on TikTok, on Twitter or X for their news. Where is the education in all of this? Where is the truth in all of this? And I think that, and I've had many conversations, especially since October 7th, many different people on the truth, on the facts on the ground. And when people realize simple facts like the idea that Hamas terrorists use civilians to shield themselves and to launch rockets from, and when they see the map of Israel, where there are 2.5 million Arabs living peacefully with Jews, and yet not one Jew living in the West Bank or in Gaza, that, I think, all of a sudden ignites some spark of truth or of recognition in people, in which they are able to finally open up their eyes and see the real reality, the truth, as mentioned. So I think education is number one. If I had to point to a second method in order to really brush off all of the noise that we're receiving from X and TikTok and the other means that you mentioned, but I think that second method really speaks to this notion that evil cannot have any justification, that there is a clear boundary between that which is good and that which is evil. The second we try to excuse evil, that is when evil permeates into our minds, permeates into our behaviors, and then eventually contaminates society altogether. So I think asking people, well, is the raping of innocent women or of women altogether, is the raping of women evil? Yes. Is decapitating children evil? Is shooting babies in their cribs, like my son who was there on October 7th saw, is that evil? Yes. So let's not try and justify it now. Let's try to find excuses for it. I think there needs to be almost a realignment in society in which we define evil and we define good, and we find no common denominator between the two.
You know, Nietzsche made the comment years ago that God is dead. And part of what he meant when he was saying that was our loss of having faith in God, regardless of what religion you are, is one of the things that starts to allow men, evil men, to be able to capture us, to be able to pull us in the wrong direction. And he accurately predicted that we would end up having world wars that would kill millions of people. To me, I look at this first on TikTok, Emily. I think you know this. We had I put up a post that was negative about Xi, and it had a newspaper article in the back that had his picture on it. Well, it started to go viral, and TikTok took it down. And they sent us a notice saying, well, we took it down because you didn't have the right to use that article. So I thought, So I tested it. I had a friend put up one that put up a negative comment about Trump. They let it go. I had another one put up with a negative comment about Biden. They let it go. But if it was Xi, they took it down. So I put up 4 more articles about Xi to test it. Every one of them they took down. There is absolutely no doubt. It seems incredible when you live in the United States, but there is no doubt that that media is a slanted media, and that they are promoting propaganda that they want to promote, and they're stopping it, the messages that they don't. Now, those social medias can also amplify things. They can amplify the things they want, and they are definitely amplifying what happened in Palestine, and they are not amplifying any of the things that happened in Israel, and they're doing that intentionally. You just can't get away from it. So I think you're right on the media that you take in ends up being important. But we just had Martin Janal on, and Martin is doing some wonderful work with, what's the name of his organization, Emily?
Stand With Us.
Stand With Us. What they're doing is they're taking on the universities that have in the past stopped right-wing people from being able to speak up. And by the way, people that I probably disagree with, but they stopped them from speaking up. And then they permitted people who were saying very anti-Semitic things to speak up, which you cannot help but look at that and say, well, if you're stopping one and you're allowing the other, you are picking a side. You're promoting a side. And in addition to that, they've created a series of rules that say that we have to keep students safe. So Martin has gotten a group of lawyers. I think he said over 100 lawyers are filing suits against universities in the United States based on this very issue. I know that there are people from the synagogue that have gone out with empty strollers talking about the children that have been abducted or killed in October the 7th. We also know there are posters that we have been promoting that have people who have been kidnapped. We've seen them in billboards. Emily and I have some on our refrigerator, but the point is, that's a way to educate people and to make certain that we speak up. The only way we can win this, we're not going to really be able to shut down the other side from speaking. We have to speak up more than they are. And the facts are on our side. As an example, they say Israel's an apartheid state. Well, I've been to Israel. I've been inside the Knesset. I've met with the Muslim party inside the Knesset. That's a political liberty that they've been granted, and people organize in the Muslim community. They certainly, if you're in Israel proper, you're not discriminated against if you're Muslim. That means there must be something different that's happening other than apartheid, because apartheid means that you have a racist state that's implementing racist policies. And the answer is that's just not true inside of Israel proper. But something else is happening in the West Bank and in Gaza that doesn't fit that definition. But if we allow the other side to keep saying it, if we allow them to keep promoting it, and we don't speak up, of course young people are going to believe that that's the truth. We have to provide them with thoughtful discussion and thoughtful dialogue about what really is happening. And to me, that's the whole purpose of this show today.
Mm-hmm. And, to your point, Paul, let me just juxtapose to you and to your audience two different scenes. One scene comes from 1987, when my family and I moved from France to South Africa. South Africa was an apartheid state at that time. And I remember vividly, I was a young boy, but I remember how they told us that you as a white man are allowed to walk on one side of the street, but if a black man walks in front of you, then he's going to have to cross the street, because he's not allowed to walk on the same side as a white man is allowed to walk on. Now, if there's a white man on the other side of the street, then he has to walk in the middle of the street, where the bicycles are, where animals are, etc. That was apartheid. I remember there were buses for white and buses for blacks. There were restrooms for whites and restrooms for blacks. I remember the apartheid that was happening in South Africa, and I was devastated by it. And so that's one scene. The other scene takes us back to 3 weeks ago, when I had the privilege of being in Israel again. I was visiting wounded soldiers at the Soroka Hospital in Beersheba in the south of Israel. And all of a sudden, the siren went on, signaling that a bomb was on the way to the area. A bomb, by the way, directed by the Hamas terrorists towards innocent civilians, not what Israel does, but they direct it towards terrorists. They directed bombs towards innocent civilians. So the siren went on. And we were all trying to find a bomb shelter. And as we crossed the hallway, I saw an Arab, an employee of the hospital, take out a carpet and praying. I guess he didn't feel the need to go to a bomb shelter. Maybe it's just too common of a scene that it doesn't bother them anymore. But took out a carpet to pray in his own Islamic way. And I said to myself, wow, and they called Israel an apartheid state? Here is an employee of an Israeli hospital exercising his freedom of religion in the most, I would say, revealed way. Yet people say that we are an apartheid state. This is not the apartheid I knew in South Africa. So it's certainly very, very, very far from any type of apartheid. But that was just really, I just wanted to share that, because it's two scenes that came
powerful.
He was speaking that are very powerful. And if we share that message, I think truth resonates and people get the message and hopefully are able to then shut down the TikTok voices in their minds.
Rabbi, I have another question for you. So, speaking to the Jewish community, I know that there's some voices that have expressed fear in identifying as Jewish, and out of concern for retaliation or being targeted for hate crimes, they were questioning taking down the mezuzah, a Jewish identification, off their door, um, and essentially blending. What do you recommend? I think this is another threat to Judaism. Is that fear that may resonate within the Jewish community? What do you recommend to those people?
So, as a rabbi of a large community, I mean, I've had this question many, many times. People have thought to hide their mezuzahs, that Jewish symbol at the entrance of homes and the entrance of their bedrooms. People have thought to take off their stars of David from their necklaces. People have thought altogether to hide their Jewish symbols, as you're mentioning. My response to them is that not only should you not take off those symbols, but maybe you should increase them. Because the very symbols that you are thinking to take off are the symbols that they are targeting. Our enemies are targeting. Evil is targeting. So why allow it to win? Instead, show them that you will stand as a proud Jew more than ever before, so that the fire that they are seeking to extinguish will illuminate even stronger. And I know that this comes with concerns and worries. And look, I grew up in France before moving to South Africa. I lived in France, where I'm feeling the same type of atmosphere today in America as I did in France 40 years ago, 35 years ago, where I was attacked by 7 years old, and I was attacked by a 14-year-old teenager saying that I'm a dirty Jew, and shoved me. And there was that general atmosphere that has only amplified itself in France ever since. But I know that sometimes this could invite anti-Semitism and very fierce and violent forms of anti-Semitism. But my answer to that is that, yes, fine. So maybe be more cautious. Maybe, just walk, instead of walking alone in the street, walk with someone else, like I told someone. But on the other hand, they will discover whether you're Jewish or not, regardless of your Star of David. But during a time of war, we have to side with good. We have to side with all those great shining symbols that they want to eradicate. So if we are going to stand for truth and stand for good, then we have to amplify them and, God forbid, not erase them. To quote Albert Einstein, who famously said that evil happens in the world not because of evil people, but because of good people who stand silent when evil happens. I think this is a time where we cannot retort to silence, silencing our symbols or silencing our voices. We have to strengthen them and make them sound from the mountaintops of the world more than ever before. Because that's the only way really good will eventually prevail.
I can speak from a political standpoint on this, and I can make you a guarantee. History is full of examples of what happens when people don't speak up. It's full of those examples, which is why one of the slogans for Israel was "Never Again." Well, never again, it can't just be a slogan for Israel. We can't allow that to happen to anyone, anywhere. And the way that you stop it is not by waiting until it's too late, because what happens with communication is if the other side is speaking up and the other side is telling things that aren't true, and they're making claims like apartheid, which if you're using the word apartheid in Israel, you either haven't been there or you're utilizing propaganda to promote a very radical point of view. You're trying to cast the blame on them, back to why people do things politically. If we don't speak up now, we will regret this. it is really important that people play a role today. And that doesn't mean that you have to be mean or angry or hurt anyone or say bad things to them, but you cannot allow a lie to continue without confronting it. And if we do, the consequences of that historically have been very, very bad.
Mm, mm. Right. And look, the other side of that coin, which really relates to another type of question that I've received, not just whether I should hide my Star of David and my mezuzah and my kippah and so on, my Jewish symbols altogether, but the question of how can I participate in this fight? I mean, this IDF soldiers are doing what they could. People in Israel are doing what they could. But I, living here in Scottsdale, Arizona, how can I stand for good? And my answer to that is that this is not just a physical war. I truly believe that this is a spiritual war. And in this spiritual war between good and evil, we can all participate. And by amplifying the voices of truth, and by shining those symbols more than ever before, and by standing for the voiceless and voicing our own voices of truth, we can participate in the spiritual war and help those that are dealing also with the physical aspect of this war prevail. But this goes back to what you were saying, Paul, that silence is not an option. We have to take an active role, each in our own way, in participating in this physical and spiritual war. For some people, that means praying. For some people, it means influencing public opinion. For others, it means doing good deeds, or as we say in Hebrew, mitzvahs, because as we believe, a little bit of light can expel a lot of darkness. And for some people, it is using their own God-given talents in ensuring that the forces of good are being supported. But we must take an active stand. We cannot be silent. That's not an option.
You know, there's a psychological study. Emily will probably have to correct me on this one because she actually reads the facts. I kind of just glaze over some of the psychological stuff. But nonetheless, it was a study on OCD. And in this study, they began to try to help people with fears, people who were like overwhelmingly repressed because of their fears. They found that when they confronted them with facts and truth and other items, it didn't get rid of the fears, but it increased the courage, which are two dramatically different things. They're not the same. It actually is okay to have fear. There's nothing wrong with fear being there. But your courage comes from a more enlightened side of you, a more spiritual side of you. It's about the ideal of what a human being can be. And when you become courageous, you become empowered. And that begins to have an effect on changing your life. This is one where there's a good reason why people are afraid. We've seen historically what happens. But building courage is something that through experience we can actually do.
Beautiful. And dare I say then, that courage leads to greatness. You know, it reminds me of what William Shakespeare also said, that some are born great, some come into greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And I think these times have greatness thrust upon us. And it's with that courage and the conviction of truth and the determination of our heart that we will triumph.
All right, so I have one last question, and then I'll let Emily do the last one. Here's my last question. I'm going to go back to the Jacob story. And this is an actual theological question. So Jacob wrestles with an angel and ends up becoming the father of what we know of being Israel today. His name is changed to Israel. And that word means to wrestle with God, as I understand it. I had a Jewish scholar who I worked with during the time that I was mayor. And one of the things that he said to me, and I don't know if this is correct or not, but he said that most Jewish scholars throughout the Torah and the Talmud do question things about God, that it's ingrained as part of the religion, and that you actually grow your strength from that you grow your strength from those questions. I have two questions. Does the name struggle with God have any real meaning for Israel? Or is it just the fact that they took the name because Jacob was the father?
That's a great question. It has real meaning, and it has a fundamental meaning for Israel. You know, it's interesting because you can tell the nature of a culture by the number of words they have for certain things. So, for example, Eskimos have, I think, 11 words for snow, because that's the culture that they're in. The Jews have 24 words for question in Hebrew and Aramaic, because it's part and parcel of who we are. We wrestle with God. We wrestle with history. We wrestle with humanity all together. Wrestle on the side of good always, but we wrestle in order to ensure that good wins. But I think it goes deeper. And it goes to the very definition of our relationship between us and God. Judaism, I think, is quite unique, perhaps, in this type of definition. The big question is, what is God for us? Is he a master, as some other religions would say? For example, Islam means to subdue yourself, because God is the master and we are his servants. Other religions may say that, no, God is a parent, or they call him a father in heaven, and we, therefore, are his children. But Judaism, I think, takes it a step further. And it says that God is not just a master, it's not just a parent, but God is a partner. In fact, the word that we mentioned before, the word for good deed, which is mitzvah, does not just mean good deed, it means partnership. Because when I do good in this world, I am partnering with God. I'm exercising my side of my partnership with God. And in this relationship, we tell God, look, we're partners in bettering this world. You have to do your part. And when we feel like God doesn't do his part, we're allowed to go and tell God, hey, there's evil happening. October 7th happened. Where were you, God? What's wrong with you? Where is your partnership? Where is your side of the deal? On the other hand, we can only say that if we are exercising our side of the deal and really doing our very best to do good in this world and to better this world. That's the ultimate type of relationship, and therefore this goes to the very definition of the way we view God. God is there as a partner, and therefore we can wrestle with him from time to time, as good partners wrestle with each other all the time.
You know, the United States, I really do believe that, well, you can see how the values of Judaism played out not only throughout places like Israel, but into Christianity, and then later on into the United States. To me, no Judaism, no individualism. I mean, you talk about partnering with God. The whole idea of the United States being founded on these ideas that every human being is deserving of dignity is something that goes all the way back. And I love the fact that you say that there are so many different ways in which they use question, so many different words that they have for it, because I think that is fundamental. And I do think that it's acceptable for us to ask questions, but I love what you have to say. We have a part that we have to play in this as well.
That's correct. You know, just to add quickly, but one of the Nobel Prize winners, Isidore Rabi, was received the Nobel Prize for physics. He was once asked, how did you achieve such greatness? He said, it was thanks to my grandmother. You see, I grew up in Poland, and my parents were very hardworking people, and they were never home when I came back from school. Instead, it was my grandmother who greeted me back from school every day. But she never asked me, so how was school today? Did you make any new friends today? Instead, she only had one question. And that question, every single day that she posed, was, so Isidore, did you have any good questions for your teacher today? And that's what led me to greatness. So there's a great benefit to questioning.
All right, Dr. Basha, last question.
Yes. So I just want to confess, Rabbi. So Paul and I often speak about you, and I think this was a little bit of our ploy to get you to be on our show. I mean, obviously to talk about anti-Semitism, but for us to have some of these like really deeper philosophical, spiritual, psychological, geopolitical questions for you. And I know that there's, many more burning questions and topics that we'd love to discuss with you. And so I appreciate your time and wisdom and sharing your insights. I think one of the things that I really witness in the forensic and clinical work that I do is this, I think that it's maybe convenient to consider that evil exists outside of us. But it's even harder to confront the evil that may exist within us as individuals. And so, there is this struggle that the capacity for good and evil exists within us, the capacity, and that we have the free will to choose our path, to find our meaning, to find our purpose in life. And I just want to ask you, like, what is it that you use as a guide for knowing whether or not you're on the right path? Sometimes it's not so clear, or what is it that you recommend to others in discerning that for themselves?
That's that's maybe the ultimate question of life, because like you said, we're professionals at finding the evil on the outside, but how about the evil on the inside? So we fight sexism and bigotry and so on, but how about the 10 commandments that speak of our own inclinations, some of them are which are evil? Not many speak about that, and it's so crucial and so vital. Look, my methods, I have a mentor, my beloved mentor, Rabbi Din Steinsaltz, who was a world scholar, passed away 3 years ago. And I still have his lessons reverberating in my mind. But when I am in a confused state, I have a different mentor, a living mentor, lives in New York, Rabbi Simon Jacobson, that I consult with. And I think that's crucial for everyone to have a mentor. I also think that another method is simply to divorce ourselves sometimes from that state of confusion and engage in other actions, and then come back to those questions 3 or 4 or 5 days later. And we will find that our mind is much more clear if we distance ourselves from the turmoil of the emotions that these moments of confusion can create. That's another method. Sometimes, again, we won't be equipped to deal with that which we are dealing with, even if we distance ourselves for 4 or 5 days. So that's when we go back to the mentor. But I think that another maybe more difficult pathway, because it's a pathway that's hard to decipher, and that is to ask ourselves, what is our intuition or a gut feeling? I wholeheartedly believe that there is a soul in every one of us that sends us signals. I call that soul signals, but other people, again, call that intuition or gut feelings. In fact, Malcolm Gladwell has a book about those intuitions called Blink. It's called Blink because, right, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but because it's that blink moment that gives you the right pathway, the right formula. So I think the more people can be in touch with their own intuition, the better it is. Now, very hard, especially when there's so much going on in our day to day. And maybe, again, that's why you need a mentor. It goes back to method 1. But if you feel like you have a deep intuition and that you are aligned with it, then listen to it and follow its calling. I have a dear friend in the community. He's a big businessman. He owns a very big high-tech company. And he just told me a few weeks ago that he had a business deal on his table in which everything and every advisor of his told him that he should take it and he should sign the deal. But somehow he didn't feel comfortable with it. It was his soul signal again speaking to him. And he decided not to take it. And a week later, they discovered that one of the people on the other side of the deal was a crook. So his intuition, once again, led him in the right way. But I think these are 3 general methods. There are more, but I think the most important of all is having mentors.
I think the mentor issue is right. I find as I'm listening to you, to me, morality is such a mystery. And here's the mystery. how come there's a standard morality that exists in most people everywhere, regardless? And maybe that is a spirit, maybe that's God, maybe that, but it's definitely there, and you can see it over and over again. To me, it's a mystery, but I love the idea that you say maybe that's our intuition. Our intuition is our connection to that.
Very well said. That's right.
All right, so Rabbi, here's what we'll do. We'll wrap this up, but I would love to just have a prayer for the many people who are stressed about this in the United States, certainly people in the Jewish community, and helping them find their courage to speak up and to be a part.
Sure. Yes. Let's engage in a prayer together. And I'll speak the words of my heart as I hear them from my divine soul. But we'll begin. We lift our eyes up to the heavens and ask you, God, to infuse each and every one of us with clarity of mind and focus to choose the pathway of goodness and of truth in every iota of our lives. We ask you that you guide us with courage, persistence, and resilience as we follow those pathways of goodness and truth, and as we turn them into our own calling and to our own vocation. We ask you, God, to protect us from all harm and from all evil. We ask you that we become aligned with our souls and with the light of our souls, so that we can become beacons of light in this world to help expel this darkness. And we ask you, God, that you bless us with all of the strength and all of the tools and all of the health necessary to continue to be your agents of goodness and your ambassadors of kindness to the world around us, to help bring about our ultimate salvation and redemption. May it happen speedily. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Rabbi Allouche, thank you very much for being with us today. Also, a special thanks from Emily and I for your mentorship, not only of the community, but for us, and the involvement that you have with our daughter and her spiritual growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's really an honor and a pleasure. And I'm blessed to know you. I'm blessed to know you. I'm blessed to have my soul intertwined with yours.
We're so grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, all the best. Bye-bye.
I'd like to thank our guests for being a part of this program as we try and help rekindle the American spirit. If you like what it is that you've heard, or you want to be a part of our community, push that subscribe button, or go to www.optamerican.com/premium and become one of our premium members. We love having you as a part of the show. Thanks for being with us. If you have any comments when you subscribe, we love to hear them, even if they're comments that where you're disagreeing with us, or maybe they're more on the negative side. We feel like we learn a lot from what it is that you have to say. Thanks again. Be optimistic. This is Paul Johnson. Have a good day.